Instead of talking about the issue that voters say is their number one concern, the economy, President Trump spent the week repeating baseless claims of voter fraud. During a visit to Georgia, the ground zero of Trump's election conspiracy theories, Trump devoted large portions of his speech billed as having a focus on the economy, instead relitigating the 2020 election. This time, he defended the FBI's raid of a Fulton County election office, saying Democrats, quote, cheated like dogs to win the election 6 years ago.
They have the ballots. That should be no problem, right? They have the ballots. FBI came in and raided. They found plenty of stuff. And now they have the ballots. And the Democrats are fighting like hell. They're trying to stop anybody from looking. You know why? Because they cheated like dogs.
Okay. Trump's visit comes amid escalating threats to federalize state-run elections, which would go against the Constitution. Just that old thing. For now, a Trump-aligned Georgia election board has declined to intervene in Fulton County. But notably, one of the 5 members left the door open to further action, telling reporters, quote, I'm waiting to see what happens with the DOJ and the FBI seizure and see what comes out of that. Joining us now, Tia Mitchell, Washington Bureau Chief for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and former Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan. He is now a candidate for Georgia governor, running as a Democrat. Tia, I want to start with you because we called this ground zero for Trump's election conspiracy. It really is, right? Why, in all of your reporting for 2020, have you gleaned why President Trump is so obsessed with Georgia and losing Georgia?
That's a good question. I do think of all the swing states, Georgia is a place where Trump has a lot of friends in power, or if not out and out friends, people who want to stay friendly to him, allies. I also think that Georgia was very close in 2020, and Georgia is also when Joe Biden carried Georgia in 2020, but also Ossoff and Warnock changed the balance of power in the Senate in 2020. So Georgia was just really consequential into reining in the Trump administration, giving Democrats that trifecta. And I think that's maybe why, of all the swing states Trump lost, he cares the most about Georgia.
Mr. Duncan, thank you very much for coming to the weekend. I want to play something that the president said on Thursday with regard to mail-in ballots, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
We don't want to have mail-in ballots where they're mailed in from all parts of the place. Mail-in ballots are crooked as hell. We're the only country in the world that use this type of mail-in ballot, the only country in the world. I'll tell you what, Republicans have to win this one. We'll never lose a race. For 50 years, we won't lose a race.
And so I wanted to play that for 2 reasons. One, that straight up cheating is what he's trying to do by wanting to do away with mail-in ballots. But back when you were a Republican, I seem to remember that Republicans used to love mail-in ballots. That was a surefire way to guarantee that your voters and their votes got counted on Election Day. And now Republican President Trump has turned that on its head. Just I would love from your vantage point here, why you think, I'm assuming, the president is wrong when it comes to his trashing of mail-in ballots and what that says about the integrity of voting.
Well, thanks for playing that clip so early in the morning. You got my blood pressure going. Yeah, look, Donald Trump and his cast of characters that follow him as Republicans, this is all a solution in search of a problem. And they want to try to fit their narrative of this election being rigged through this shiny object and this shiny object. It's all been lies and continues to grow, and they're doubling down on it. Look, if somebody shows up to the voter rights conversation, access to voting conversation fairly and squarely, then they're not trying to limit crowds. They're trying to open up access and just validate. That's what this should all be about. And it's all about those exceptions. What about that nurse who works a 24-hour shift to support her family that can't show up on Election Day, that has to mail in that ballot early? What about that person that's homebound due to an injury or an illness? The list goes on and on. Look, this is an outright attempt for Donald Trump to put his thumb on the scale. You have to look no further than the FBI raids. That had nothing to do with the 2020 election. That's been validated, certified, hand counted, double count, all of it. It has to do with sowing little seeds of doubt so that he can claim fraud when they lose the midterms in 26.
Mr. Duncan, I want to stay with you a sec on this, though, because in 2020, you were one of a handful of Republicans really across the country that actually stood up against Trump and maintained that you had seen no evidence of voter fraud that Trump was claiming. Do you think that there's anyone left in an elected position or an election administration position in Georgia who, if there were similar efforts to overturn the results of a future election, would actually be there and be in place to stand up to President Trump and the Republican apparatus?
I certainly hope so. I mean, that's the backbone of democracy. And it's interesting to see how Republicans react to me in my stance to push back as hard as I possibly can. In private, they're very supportive. They can't wait for Donald Trump to get out of the scene. They cannot explain tariffs or Greenland or weaponizing the Department of Justice or these ICE raids or even these vicious attempts to try to limit voting just to steer the election towards Republicans. But publicly, most of them lack the courage to say it out loud. Until Republicans have the courage to call Donald Trump out for being the worst mistake this country's ever made, they're still going to have those problems. And the best thing we can do as Democrats is win these elections, continue to win them fairly and squarely, continue to harness the momentum of this movement to push MAGA back into the closet and let us run this country in a way that's fair and equitable, even for the people that don't vote for us. I think that's an important cornerstone of democracy.
Tia, when you're looking at kind of the landscape in Georgia, not just the electoral who's going to win, the racehorse landscape, but also the feeling of the folks who used to want to volunteer as to help facilitate the elections, right? The election workers. That is not a paid job mostly. When you look at the ways in which folks know that Donald Trump has tried to convince elected officials in that state to find votes for him in 2020. How are the normal people, not the electors, but the normal people kind of thinking about elections in Georgia? Do they feel like they're going to be free and fair? Because they are, like we've been saying, they are ground zero. Yeah, I mean, I do think some of it depends, like so much in our politics, is where you already are coming from. If you're already aligned with Donald Trump, if you consider yourself a MAGA Republican, then maybe you're celebrating the raid on the Fulton County Election Office because you still believe the lies and the misinformation about the 2020 election. And of course, we know in Metro Atlanta, it's very Democratic, a lot of Democratic voters, and they are frustrated with leadership in the state. They're frustrated that there has been so much focus on, again, relitigating an election that was nearly 6 years ago. And we know there have been attacks on election workers that has affected the ability to recruit even paid positions, because people, saw what happened to Ruby Freeman, for example, and say, I don't want to have to deal with that. And then there, again, is the concern, despite what Donald Trump says, elections are up to states, and most states delegate that responsibility to counties and local governments, and they need professional people who can run elections. It is not an easy job, even under the best of circumstances, and I think there is a lot of concern that in states like Georgia, these state and local election boards are now being constituted in ways that don't embody, confidence in the election system and how that could play out, not just this year, but long term.